I'm Lynda Dossey. I'm an architect, and today we'll be taking an architectural walking tour of the Loop in downtown Chicago. In the early 1880s and through 1900, during the first economic boom of Chicago, all the train lines were built in the Loop to sort of demarcate the downtown area. We're standing in front of the Monadnock Building. It was completed in 1891, and it is the last, possibly, but definitely the tallest, fully masonry load-bearing high-rise. It caps out at 291 feet and pretty much met the limit that you could go for height for a true load-bearing structure. You can track how the loads are translated vertically by looking at the windows at the top, where the depth of the thickness of the wall is only 18 inches. But by the time we come down to the base level, the walls are 6 feet thick, and they actually get thicker below grade, working their way to a raft foundation that's sitting on Chicago's marshy soil. At the entrance, they used granite to sort of demarcate where you go in and carve the name onto the building. But all the rest of it is brick, layered upon layer upon layer upon layer. And it gives this sort of sculptural quality as though the whole building has been carved from clay just because of the uniformity of the material. The majority of the buildings at the time were highly articulated. The original design of this building was intended to face over the brick with the highly ornate Egyptian motif. However, other people in the firm and the owner decided to leave it as is, showing the raw form and the raw materiality of the building. So the oriel bays and also the tripart window, where you have the central window with the two flanking windows, is a very typical style for the first Chicago school here in Chicago that began with the first round of skyscrapers in the 1880s to the 1900s. We're in front of the Inland Steel Building. It's the first building that was built in the Loop in over 20 years, and it was completed in 1958. It was the headquarters of the Inland Steel Manufacturing Company and steel provider. They wished the building to express all the many products and services that they offered. So as a consequence, they made the decision to use brushed stainless steel over their entire facade with glass. It marks an extreme departure from the majority of buildings that had been built in the Loop to that time. Up until this point, most of the high-rises here in the Loop were all masonry or terracotta clad or stone clad on top of a steel frame construction. In this building, you can see the steel on the exterior of the building, and it's clad solely in glass. There's no motifs, there's no ornament. It's just stripped down raw materials as minimally as possible. The stripped down minimalist, pure brute form is kind of what defines the second Chicago school. It espoused upon many of the ideas that Mies van der Rohe had been sprinkling around Chicago in some of his own works. The columns were all articulated along the edge of the floor plate, and long span beams were installed between the columns, which means there are no interior columns, and it is one big floor plate of nothing to lay out for office space. The express structure on the outside of the building as the aesthetic ended up being kind of a defining moment of the American skyscraper moving forward after World War II. We're across the river from Marina City, one of Chicago's cities within the city. Marina City was the first post-World War II complex. It houses retail, a marina, an office building, a movie theater, and a skating rink when built, but it was capped off by these amazing residential towers that are just striking. When completed, the towers were the tallest residential tower in the world, but also the tallest reinforced concrete building in the world. If you were to compare and contrast this building to the other buildings in the area, in the 1960s was an exploration of concrete in the Béton brute form as a high-rise here. This is kind of pushing past the original Béton brute aesthetic into something more elegant. And unlike the other systems of where you're framing with steel, which has to be square, concrete allows you great fluidity of form. That's clearly evident when you look at the structural ribs and cantilevering that's happening. You can see the beams coming up off of the columns, springing and curving around, creating the actual structure that keeps the cantilever spanning. The uses of the buildings have evolved now so that the office building is now a hotel. The movie theater is now a performing arts venue. And the skating rink is gone and replaced by a restaurant. but the marina is still active, and the housing towers are still some of the most amazing views and apartments in the city. So the building behind me, mostly above me, is the Willis Tower, although most locals will refer to it as the Sears Tower, because it was built by the Sears Roebuck Company as their headquarters. They had to buy 15 different buildings and pay the city $2.7 million to close and decommission a street so they could put together 2 whole city blocks. During the process, they discovered that the bundle tube system is the most efficient way to build tall. You have one square in the center that's sort of being braced by all the surrounding squares. So as you look at this building, there's one square that will continue up to the very top of the building. And as the other ones come on, it starts to self-buttress itself all the way down. And the floor plates get smaller and smaller. There is a local story that they bundled together 9 cigars in the office one night and pulled them up to the heights that they wanted, and that's how they determined the final design of the top of the building. For 25 years, this was the tallest building in the world, and it is still the tallest building in Chicago. For tourists, you can go up to the observatory floors, where they've added recently a new feature called the ledge. If you look closely at the very top of the building, you sort of see these glass boxes protruding out of the facade, and you can look through a glass floor all the way down. We're standing in front of the Thompson Center, formerly the State of Illinois building. It was built by Helmut Jahn and completed in 1984. He won a design competition, and his competition was, let's just say, less conventional than the others that were submitted. The building relies on an extruded donut plan taking up the whole site, but then it carves away the whole southeastern facade, opening up to the government buildings that are catty-corner opposite the street. And it also allows pedestrians on the outside to be able to look in and see their government at work. The whole concept was this idea of transparency in government. The color scheme is one of those things that is frequently debated amongst Chicagoans, but the general idea was it was red, white, and blue. As part of that carve on the southeast corner, the facade also tilts its way back, which actually allows more light into the atrium, but it also allows a relief to the city blocks around us. All of these buildings are very square and tall, and they just kind of compress you in. So by carving the building back, you're creating a relief for everyone on the plaza. The glass is a mix of many different types of glass. So some of it's reflective, some of it is clear, some of it is spandrel glass, which is back painted, some of it is metal panel that's glazed in to give the pattern across the surface. The building also ties into the CTA Clark station, which is one of the busiest CTA stations in town, as all the train lines in the loop come to it, including the blue line that runs out to O'Hare. This is the point of departure into the downtown area. If you walk up to the building, you can get a glimpse into the atrium, and you can see all the exposed structure that's holding up the atrium glazing, and also all the different balconies and interconnecting stairs between the levels inside the atrium. So it's a very super tech kind of building. All the structure is exposed and revealed, and it's telling you the story of how the building is put together. We're standing in front of Aqua Towers, completed in 2009 by Studio Gang Architects, headed by the design efforts of Jeannie Gang. It is world famous and well known for its undulating facade. The facade is not random. The idea was to stretch out the balconies as far as you could, to look around all the forest of other high-rises around here, to seek a better view for something else in the city. The other benefit of all those towers is it breaks up the facade, which also breaks up the reflections on the glass, actually making this high-rise bird-friendly, to the point that PETA awarded it its Proggy Award also in 2009. The building was not performed in any sort of three-dimensional CAD. The curves were mostly followed along by hand on trace paper, similar to how one might do animation. Right now we're in front of 150 North Riverside, completed in 2017 by Getch Partners, and Magnus and Klemensic as the structural engineers. This building is rather remarkable in the sense that it's on a lot that nobody wanted because they thought it was too hard to build on. 25% of the lot is allowed to be built on. That's the only part of the building that touches the ground and actually goes down into foundations. A part of that is a consequence of the fact of the riverfront setback requirement by the city that's occurring on this side that sets the building back 75 feet from the river's edge. On the other side were the Amtrak train lines that prevented any structure coming through down below and limited what could be built up above. From level 8 down to level 4 are cantilevering columns that are bracketing the floor plates back to the core and holding the whole system up. For this reason, a lot of us locals refer to it alternately as the guillotine and the tuning fork and the champagne flute, because we are fond of nicknaming our buildings here. But it's an amazing feat of engineering, and this building has already won countless awards for both design and engineering.